Well, hello and welcome to episode 28 of the TF Cast. We're back. And
with us today, we have our friend Colin Scharf. Tell us what you've been up to.
Wow, what haven't I been up to?
probably a lot, I guess.
I haven't climbed a mountain. I didn't ride my bike thing today, so I got to do that. More broadly speaking, I guess just in a nutshell, I'm coming off a lot of really big projects. I spent the better half, I should say, of 2020 recording the River City Holiday Christmas album featuring all local artists from Mankato. I put together a little music video, little by which I mean album length music video for the album. And yeah, I'm sort of in the middle of recording my solo album as well. So
the older brother.
This would be Silver Summer, actually. Yeah. We can kind of untangle that little knot right there later. But yeah, so, a lot of creative projects are sort of happening for me right now that I'm pretty excited about.
That's cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Maybe we can revisit the Christmas album, or should we get into that right away? I'm curious.
I want to talk about that right away.
Sure, let's do it.
That was a year-long project, right?
Start to finish, I took the job, got hired to do it in November, I believe, of 2019. I kind of signed the contract with the Free Press and sort of got that set into motion. And was really, my plan was to record, starting in the winter of 2020, kind of like February, March. I really wanted to do it right away because I knew it was going to take a while. And then the pandemic hit. And so I just sort of had to say, everybody had to kind of like, come out from under our little hidey holes, if you will. And the dust had cleared and it was late May, early June. And it seemed safer, to kind of get together and start recording. So yeah, I recorded the first track with Stacey K in, I think, late May. And mailed the master copy of the CD to the CD pressing plant on, I think, November 2nd, maybe November 4th, early November. So yeah, really May through the end of October, I was going all out with this Christmas stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you had to hunt out all the talent for that, or was there some kind of a process for how that worked?
Yeah. So the idea, Rob Murray, formerly of the Free Press, was the sort of genius behind the whole thing, in spearheading it and in the initial outreach to artists. He had a handful of artists in mind. And then, I was talking to Laura, my wife, Laura, of course, Laura Schultz, talking with Laura a lot. And we were like, oh, what if we had this person? And what if we included that person? And so between Rob's initial, I think 6, and then Laura and I brought in, what's 13 minus 6? 7? 7 more artists. And so it felt important to include the other artists that we brought in. We were really trying to kind of get as many different folks as we could in on the album. And of course, some people weren't able to get in on this one, but we are going to do another one this year. All things, as long as it's all safe to do that. So looking to include even more of the local talent for the next one.
Is that going to be another Free Press venture, or is this something you're taking up on your own now?
This will be, sponsored by the Free Press. Well, sort of, I guess you can kind of think of the Free Press as sort of like the record label or something, maybe, so it's like Free Press Records. And then there were other sponsors who kicked in some money to help kind of get the whole project rolling. So yes, it would be in effect sponsored by the Free Press and supported by other businesses and places in town. It's part of the album, but just to reiterate, all the proceeds from the record went to Connections Ministry Homeless Shelter. And as of 2 weeks ago, we raised $7,000 for the shelter by selling the albums. So nice. Yeah, so we'll likely, the next one, will be another fundraiser as well.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, it was. I just like kind of beside, when you finish a big project and you're like, holy cats, I did that, and of course, like I didn't do it all by myself. There was I had a lot of help, and a lot of, the artists brought me songs that were, already pretty fully realized, and all I had to do was like hit record and then just sort of mix it and sort of make it sound good. But still, like you get done doing all that lifting, and I think as soon as I mailed off the album at the start of November, it felt like whoosh, this whole weight was off my shoulders. Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of heavy lifting on the back end of that stuff. People don't always perceive that, but it's certainly there. I wanted to ask too, because I wrote a little thing about that, and when I was looking into it, I noticed the thing with the Free Press bringing it up, and I wondered, what do they have? What was that part of them that makes albums, or do they have a more creative end that isn't just...
Sure. Yeah. So for a while, a few years ago, we Goodnight Goldust may have played the first one. God, I think this was 2013. The Free Press was trying to do, they weren't trying, they were doing it. They were doing a sort of like a tiny desk concert, kind of thing. I remember obviously Goldust played. I know B-Balm Fields played. The Fry played, of course. The band formerly known as The Fry, now Joe Tugas and Associates, Joe and Ann played. I don't remember quite who else maybe played one, but they were trying to do, the sort of like bring music into the Free Press, kind of trying to make that happen. And then for a while, Rob Murray was doing a podcast called the Freepcast, Free Press Freepcast. And we were on that as well. I keep looking over here because I'm like looking at Laura. She's sitting over there. We were also on that a couple of years ago. So they've definitely like tried to, and have succeeded in like incorporating sort of like an arts department, like a live arts kind of thing under the Free Press banner. But this was a first for them, and it was sort of inspired by another newspaper. I'm not sure where, but there was another newspaper, sort of similar market, sort of mid-sized city, who did a Christmas record with their local artists. And so I think Rob from the Free Press and I believe the publisher, Steve, at the Free Press were like, what if we did that? And then they approached me and I was like, yeah, I can do that. So they sort of opened a new door for themselves, which I think is cool.
Yeah.
Seems like a cool idea, cool way to integrate local art music with just topical good timing.
Yeah.
So for working with such a, I guess that seems wild to work with such a range of musicians. What was it like getting studio time with all these different kinds of musicians with different backgrounds, different styles? Was there challenges associated with that, or?
What I liked about working with everybody that I worked with is that they are, some of the heavy hitters, I guess, of our local scene. So they've all been in the studio, they've all recorded, they've all, written and then edited and then rewritten and sort of shaped their music down to, its essential being, right? So all of that to say, everybody that I worked with was well practiced, was rehearsed. They knew they hit their marks, right? And so that made it really easy for me. When you get a group in the studio, that just is rehearsed and practiced and prepared, it's fun. You can get creative then. I remember working with Stacy K on that first track, and we did drums and sort of the foundational stuff at my studio, drums, bass, guitar, and then I was having some weird like background noise issues at my studio. So I said, let's go to Scheidels. There's a quiet room there. There's an ISO booth there. So we'll go to Scheidels. We'll do the vocals there. And then she knocked out the vocals in an hour. And then I was like, well, we've got a whole music store. Let's see what else we can add to this track. So we put piano. We got a little glockenspiel. Just little things like that. So what I loved about this record was just the ease with which I was able to work. Oh boy. I loved how easy it was to work with these artists because everybody was just super professional, I guess, is kind of what it boils down to. They all came prepared, and they came to play, if you will. From the guys from City Mouse, Billy and Ronnie and Dave Pengra, there was this incredible sensation when I had the headphones on and they were doing their harmonies, live for this track. It was like, my God, these men have been singing together for, I thought it was 40 years, but I think it's 50 years actually. They're like brothers, they have this like blood harmony just sort of from the decades of singing together. And I got chills, you don't think you're going to get like chills from hearing three dudes like sing a Christmas song, but my God, it didn't matter what they were singing about. It was just being in that room and hearing their voices, like the history of their voices together. It was just spectacular. And then when I worked with the Mukamuri sisters, Maya and Aaliyah, these, speaking of blood harmony, like they're sisters, they're actual sisters, and their harmonies, I felt like I was at I felt like I should have paid money to have seen them perform in my studio because they were just so good. Mm-hmm. It was just fantastic. So not only was it an easy experience, like in terms of recording and tracking people, it was also just a deeply gratifying experience working with such a wide array of the musicians and really, friends in town, many of whom I haven't seen play in at least a year. Yeah.
Wow. It's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing some of those stories. Why don't we jump into, so tell me a little bit more about the Silver Summer project and how that is separate from Older Brother. Let's get into that.
Sure. Branding is everything, isn't it? You just, you make the Facebook page, you play a couple shows, and suddenly you're like, oh, I started a new thing that's sort of piggybacking off of this other thing. Mm-hmm. Now I have these two, sort of social media presences. Do I close one? Do I merge them? What do I do? I guess you could call an Older Brother show like me performing solo. When I was last when I last worked with you guys or hung out with you guys and played, that was right at the beginning of the pandemic. It was like, should I do this? I don't know. Me with my electric and the sort of sampler and all that hoo-ha, all that hoopla. Not hoo-ha. That's another word. Sorry. I'm looking at Laura. She's like, not that one. You don't get out much, Older Brother, yeah, I suppose you could call Older Brother like me solo. Like if I had a cool name like, John something or other, I don't know.
John Hoo-Ha.
John Hoo-Ha, right. If I had a cool name like that, I might go by my name. But I don't have a cool name. I have my name, and my name is fine, and I'm okay with my name. But, when you're performing solo, I would rather, as somebody coming from a band background, I always like sort of that, like sort of name, the band name is cool to me. And so, yeah, so you can call Older Brother like my solo project, I guess, the like official me by myself project. Silver Summer is myself on vocals and guitar, Hannah Cesario on synthesizer and vocals, Ed Avila plays bass, and Tyler Vaughn plays the drums. And Silver Summer was kind of a challenge, actually. Laura, was it, I'm looking at Laura again here. Was it 2018 that we said, let's start a band? No. It was like fall 2019. Yeah. Laura and I were talking to our good friend David Rogers, who is now doing music again, a lot. We were talking to David, and we said, "Hey, David was trying to do a solo project. He was wanting to get back into music after being out of playing music for decades, maybe 15 years or so. David wanted to get back into music, and he was sort of talking to us, and Laura and I were like, well, I have this handful of songs that don't really have a home. Laura's got some songs that don't really have a home. They're not Gold Dust songs. They're just sort of floating out there somewhere. We're not performing them with Gold Dust. So I think Laura said, like, what if we just start side projects? And I was like, that sounds cool. So yeah, I called up Ed and Tyler and I was like, I know I want a synth on this too. And I know Hannah, I know her really well. I know she's a great piano player, and I'm sure she can figure this out. And so Ed and Tyler and Hannah and I got together. I said, here are my songs. And it just clicked. I was having so much fun with that group. I had such high hopes, for 2020 to sort of be the year where, we put out singles and we maybe release an album and then we get some attention and all this sort of fun stuff that comes along with being in a new group. And then of course the pandemic happened, but yeah, Silver Summer is a band. It's a 4-piece group. Songs are a little different. I play the same songs in Silver Summer and Older Brother, but Silver Summer obviously is the full group, so it's a bit grander in its ability to be a big sort of sound.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I kept getting hung up on the thing you were saying earlier about splitting names for projects. I thought about that a lot, and how creating a name for a solo project can help separate it from your like day-to-day experience. Kind of like, I don't think anyone wants to go out on a stage and be the person that they are in the car or something. I don't know. I think it really helps to have a persona to kind of stand behind for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You like, it's not like you're putting on a cape and like, tights and some sort of like muscle suit or something and like being a different total person, a mask, but kind of, right. You get up there, your guitar is on, or you're playing, you got your turntables and stuff, and you are suddenly somebody else, whether or not you think it or not, you become a different part of yourself. And yeah, it is cool to have that name, like sort of there to at least make you feel a little more comfortable in that new reality.
And I think the same thing can happen with a band, a group of multiple people, is you kind of form an identity as that group, and you develop a way of being, a way of interacting with the stage or your instruments that's kind of unique to that particular combination of people and sounds.
Yeah, totally. I my favorite band is and it kind of has always been The Clash. And one of the reasons I like them so much, and sort of bands like The Clash, like you can look at The Strokes, I guess like Sleater-Kinney even, just sort of groups like that where it's always that lineup. It's always that 4 or 3 or 5 people, right? They're a gang. They're a sort of unit, right? You can't have one without the other, right? And I just always love groups that are a band where everybody is like in it together. Yeah. Yeah. So, again, like doing a solo project kind of thing. I've never quite been a solo guy. I've always been a little like nervous about it for various reasons. I've always liked to sort of hide behind the sort of sound and energy of a full group. But the more I performed solo with the Older Brother thing, I think I did like 3, maybe 4 shows as Older Brother before the pandemic happened. You begin to be like, oh wait, it is kind of cool to also play solo because you can like do whatever you want. Yeah. But naturally, I miss Gold Dust. I miss Silver Summer a lot. Those are, I almost can't think about it because it starts to hurt a little too much.
It certainly comes with a little bit more vulnerability. When it's just you out there.
Yeah, definitely.
I got a question for your Silver Summer. You said you're recording that album, or is it kind of?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. I was lucky to win a pair of arts grants in 2020. I picked up a Prairie Lakes Regional Arts Council grant, and then I also in December, got notification that I had received a Minnesota State Arts Board grant. So, a couple $1,000s sort of coming my way here this last year into this year, to help me buy the gear that I need to make this record. That was sort of the idea. And really, had it not been for the pandemic, I probably would have written the grants to be like, I'm going to use this money to go work with the guy that we recorded the Gold Dust records with. I'm going to go to a studio, bring the band and go to the studio and kind of do it that way, do it the traditional way, if you will. But, people aren't going into studios, as excitedly as they were, in the days of yore. And so that coupled with the, I feel like it was a hit, the Christmas album. I feel like I did a decent job with that. That experience that I had, recording and mixing and producing that record, has given me the confidence that I can put this energy into the Silver Summer stuff and kind of make that sound pretty good. I will say though that I've started recording the Silver Summer record, and I just have to do vocals and guitar on the first single, and I am terrified to record my own parts for this track, because it's just me, you know, like producing my music, and there's this like sudden like creative wall that I'm experiencing. So if anybody wants to like sort of sit in the back of the room and like encourage me when I am recording these parts, I you know, you can come on over.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
How many, never mind. I don't have a good question about that.
Sure.
But I'm curious about the process you go for recording, I guess, and how it differs when you're recording just yourself, or I know you did a lot with the Goodnight Gold Dust too. Well, I think you went into some studios for that, but just like the different things you notice when recording with, like, I guess as a producer for the Christmas album, or as a front man for the band, kind of, and how that differs.
Yeah. I am not the first one to say it, but you know, the old saying goes, you should never produce your own album. And I was like, I'll be fine. That's fine. But you know, just to kind of reiterate what I said a second ago, like it's scary because you're the only one, you know, if you allow yourself to be, you're the only one who has the final say in how the mic is positioned and how the levels are leveled and all the different settings and things like that. And if it sounds like crap, it's on you. And if it sounds good, it's on you. So, you know, obviously there's a positive and a sort of potential negative there. But I started out, you know, years ago, I started recording when I was like 15. We got this huge, my buddies and I, we had our little punk band in the garage. We somehow pooled together $200 to buy this giant PV, like live mixing board. And, you know, I had a Shure SM58, like this mic here, plug it into channel 1, stick it in the middle of the room, turn it up. And then we had an RCA out, you know, the red and the white, to go to the 1/8 inch line in on the Dell or whatever gateway computer we had. Some godforsaken, you know, relic of a recording program. You hit record. It sounds like garbage, but you know, to your 15-year-old ears, you're like, that sounds cool because that's our band.
We made that.
Yeah. So
cool.
So like that's kind of where I got started. And then, you know, going into college, I got a Tascam 4-track. I wish I still had that thing. It was so cool. Records to cassette, just a really great little like private recording, you know, little recording station. And then, you know, you get into the USB interfaces, and it took me a really long time to like get into the USB stuff. I was recording when I moved out. I brought my Behringer 8-channel, again, live mixing board, and I was still running the RCA out into my Mac laptop. I did the first Gold Dust record with that. I did an album from my buddy Jordan Carr like that, you know, just horrendous, you know, like equipment, but I did it and it sounds fine. And so you fast forward to, you know, 2020, because of the grant and some of the funding for the Christmas album, I was able to pick up a lot of really nice, you know, like upper mid-level kind of studio gear. And that you really begin to notice just how much better you can make things sound when you have a little bit better gear, and how much less work you have to do like later on, right? A good preamp, a good mic, a good performance, and you don't have to touch it in the mixing stage, like maybe a little bit. Your question though, I think was like, what's the difference between, or what are some of the differences between recording another group, and recording yourself?
When you're forward in the project versus kind of a organizer.
Yeah, like what I liked about the Christmas album, you know, again, was that everybody kind of came prepared. There was a little bit of back and forth, you know, about some of the stuff. Like, what if you do this? What if we do it like this? Or what if we try it like that? But really it was a lot of like, oh, what if we also added this? It was a lot of like creative addition kind of stuff. Sometimes you work with a group and you're like, what if we like kind of tighten this up a little bit more, you know? And I also really like that. I like bands. I like helping bands kind of bring, you know, what the song is to them at the moment, and then trying to like find the actual, you know, album sort of record sounding song. Because there's a huge difference, right, between the live song and then the recording. You know, the live song can go on as long as it wants, but the recording, you know, 3-4 minutes is like, I think a pretty decent amount of time. So I like that sort of producing aspect. And then when that transfers into like working with myself, you begin to have like options fatigue, I think is the phrase. There's so many different ways to approach it, and you're the only one that's like in the room. And so I might have to bring in somebody, like honestly, to help me like do my parts for the Silver Summer record. Just so that I don't like freak out and like leave the room. Yeah. But I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. And in my experience too, with recording yourself and diving into some things like that, it is really easy to get caught up in all the possibilities and with no one to be like, shut up, it was right the first time, or like, no, you probably shouldn't add that extra reverb. Like, it's helpful to have some feedback.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of like a visual artist, like, you know, like literally practicing on themselves, like drawing their own hand or like drawing a self-portrait or painting a self-portrait, right? Like, you know, you have to sort of, you are yourself as the artist. So it's good to, you know, practice with your own art. And I guess in the case of being a musician / you know, recording person, like, you know, record yourself, get yourself sounding as good as you like it. But when your recording projects become like the project, like this is going to be my album, then the stakes get a little higher. And then for me, it becomes a little more like, maybe I should step back from this. I don't want to make the wrong decision, you know? I don't want to sign off on that guitar tone that like actually sucks or that vocal take that could have been, I don't know, things like that, you know? It is. And I guess just to kind of maybe cap off this sort of discussion here. I have a pair of friends, well, maybe a trio with Laura. She's back over there. Trio of people with golden ears, you know, so to speak. It's our dear friend and former bandmate, Zach Arney, is a wonderful producer, mixer, you know, engineer and in his own right. And he's taught me so much about how to do recording stuff. Like if it weren't for Zach, this Christmas album, I don't know, it would have sounded okay. But, you know, Zach really taught me a lot. Just, we had email conversations. We would Facebook and do Zooms and stuff just about little techniques here and there. So a lot of the way that I can work now is because of Zach's help. And then our friend Scott Laguerre is also he's a professor at MSU. He's been a huge help. Just sort of in sort of like a guru-y kind of like mentor way, sort of handing down knowledge. Like, try this, try that. You know, what if you pull out the drums here? Oh my God, I never thought of that. You know, like little things like that he just has up in his head. And then of course Laura, you know, she's just a great musician, a great musical thinker in her own right. And I'm always like, Laura, does this sound cool? And she's like, if she says yeah and walks away, then I'm like, okay, I think it sounds cool. But if she goes, well, you know, then I know that like, okay, it needs some work, and that's, you know, so yeah, there's, it takes a village, to make a record.
It's important to have a little bit of feedback too, because
big time.
You'll even do something like you'll record something and then you'll go to bed and you'll wake up in the morning and you'll listen to it back, and it's not, I mean, one can assume it's the same thing that you recorded last night, but sometimes you're pretty convinced that somebody changed it.
Yeah, I know. I fully agree. I was trying to figure out for one of the songs that I played earlier, or one of the songs that I played anyway, you know, for the cast here. I listened to the demo of it that I recorded over the summer. And I was like, all right, yeah, the song's cool. And then I was like, oh God, who mixed this? It sounds horrible. So yeah. I definitely hear you on that for sure.
It was in my laptop.
That's right.
Last night.
Some marmal in there.
Oh no.
Well, if we're moving on to the next topic, I think it was writing.
Sure. Yeah. Shoot, man, I'm here. I'm ready to go.
Yeah. Well, tell us about your writing. I'm kind of like a little bit, I just heard that reading earlier, and like that's what I have in my mind right now. But you have kind of a diverse, you use short stories, poetry. Just tell us about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So I do this sort of scale, right? So like my whole life, I think since I was like probably a child, like at least since I was 5. I wanted to play guitar from, I think, the time I turned 5, because the Ninja Turtles had a band and that was freaking cool. And so I wanted to play guitar. But at the same time, I was like writing scary stories, right? Like R.L. Stine kind of stuff like that, and like Ghostbusters was this whole kind of, obviously this whole thing that really impacted me and still does to this day. So like music and writing have always been sort of like vying for my attention. And when I say writing, I don't mean just like writing lyrics. I mean like actually, like I want to write books, I want to write stories, but I also want to play music. And I initially wanted to go to undergrad for sound recording. That was like my plan. I went to SUNY Fredonia, which is where Dave Fridman, who produces the Flaming Lips, take him or leave him. Fridman taught at Fredonia, and so it was like, well, Dave Fridman's the man, and I really wanted to get in the sound recording program, but I just couldn't. You had to get into the music program, and I didn't play anything like classical well enough to get in. I suppose if I tried harder, I could have done it, but an English major seemed like an easier alternative. So I switched over to English, thinking, well, I'll just be a professor. And then lo and behold, that's sort of what panned out for me. But along the way, you sort of have that energy. You read the beatniks when you're like 14 or 15, and suddenly you think you're Jack Kerouac or Allen Ginsberg, and you're like running around writing your travel poems and all this garbage. And your heart gets broken, and you have to write about that too, and all these things. And so, so I, as like a teen, I guess you could say, like 16, around that age, I was writing a lot of poetry, which is just, I would not want to read it now. I'm sure it's just like horribly embarrassing. But that sort of evolved into a little more refined poetry, I guess. In undergrad, I had some really nice teachers in undergrad who helped me sort of figure out how do you actually say what you want to say, and then how do you do it. And then by the end of undergrad, I was my writing professor in Fredonia was like, what are you doing for grad school? And I was like, well, I have an application out to a school in New York City. Haven't heard back yet. And she's like, you should apply to the school in Mankato, Minnesota. And I was like, what the hell is that? It's like, I didn't know where the hell Minnesota was, you don't travel a whole lot, and you're like, I don't know where the hell I'm going. Or I don't know where Minnesota. I thought Milwaukee was a state for a while. Nope, I know. Laura's like, oh God, she's from Wisconsin, so she's like about to throw a dart at me or something. About to throw a cheese head at me. So then the school, and so this is a long story, but this is getting to your answer, I hope. Writing was with me the whole time. It's always been there. I've always wanted to like sort of, I don't know why. You just have this desire, this sort of like something inside of you is like, tell the story. Write the thing, and that desire led me to Mankato in 2007, which, 13 years later, 14 years later, has me sitting right here in this chair with you guys. And so, writing, I actually had a really good conversation with a friend, with one of my closest friends, for about an hour this morning. He's also a writer, and he's a sort of a horror sort of genre writer. And, he's really, really great, really creative, really just wild, zany ideas. And he called me this morning and he said, Colin, I'm fried. So what do you mean, John? He goes, look, man, I've been trying every day this week and last week to write my new book, and I just can't do it. I hate everything I'm writing. And I said, John, I've in so many different ways, I've been there. I understand it. Sort of like a creative burnout, if you will. You just get to a point where you're like just completely fried. And my story with writing, I guess, is one of maybe burnout. Yeah. Like you go through 4 years of undergrad, you're writing every day, you're trying to write, imagining the books you're going to publish when you are in your sort of salt and pepper days, or whatever. And then you get into grad school and your workshops every day, and everybody's telling you how much your writing sucks and how you should be doing this or doing that. And then you get out of that and you're like, all right, now I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to be a writer for real. I'm going to publish the book. I'm going to get the novel and have a TV deal and all this stuff. And I was really trying to do that for a really long time. The first two grants, actually, just to sort of like really kind of frame it, the first two arts grants that I won were for writing, were to help me finish this book that I have going about this band from sort of where I grew up, and they go on tour and all these things happen. But writing is, to quote a friend, writing is perhaps the most inefficient art form in that in order to like fully get to the core of the story, you might have to write that story from like 3 different perspectives and maybe more, and suddenly you're staring at, a week and a half's worth of work and pages and pages and pages that might not go toward the finished product, that just are helping you get to what you actually need to say. And then here's me with music going, wow, this is fun. This is really a quicker release. You just do it and it's there. And so writing for me for a long time kind of was just tucked under the rug, because Gold Dust was doing a lot of stuff, and that was requiring and really fully satisfying those creative desires of mine. And it wasn't until recently that I kind of got back on the writing train and have been sort of trying to take that a little more seriously, I guess. I just said a lot. So,
well, I don't mean to cap that with this, but like you're certainly a storyteller. Like anyone who's like sat and talked with you, like you have stories that you can tell they're stories.
Sure. Well, thank you. Yeah. I think everybody has at least one good story, everybody has at least one good story that they could write and could be turned into a really beautiful short story or a really beautiful book or a really great Lifetime movie. Like everybody's got that one story, you should write a book about that. And it's like, yeah, do that. And, so like, I don't find myself any different than any other sort of person who wants to or aspires to be a writer. There's just, I don't quite know what I'm trying to say, I guess, but, sometimes, the ideas come out, they hit you, and then they find a way out, I guess. And if it's a story or a poem, it's there. If it's a song, then there it is. If it's a painting, if it's a techno remix, then like there it is, But somehow, if you have it in you, hopefully you're finding a way to get it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty common theme when we talk with creatives of all types, that they're just driven to create, and what it is at that moment isn't always what they're so caught up in. It's just that they will create.
Yeah.
And it sometimes the expectations that come with your past work are not always the most, good thing for what that person's creating that moment.
Yeah.
Or, there's just a whole lot of those kind of stories that we've heard. I did a bad job of articulating.
No. It's cool. Like just to go back to the conversation I had with my friend this morning. I mentioned he's primarily a sort of horror writer, sort of genre fiction, kind of like UFOs and alien conspiracies and kind of things like that. And he said, I'm trying to write this new book, and it's about sort of, I don't quite remember what he said it was about, but like along the same lines of his previous work, kind of that in that horror genre, which is great. And I've written a handful of. I love that sort of genre as well myself. I think there's a lot of beauty in there that you can sort of find some really cool stuff. But I said, like, John, like maybe it's not that you're tired of writing. Maybe it's just that you're tired of writing like this type of story. Maybe you should try to write something that isn't full of blood and slime and, crazy tentacled beasts. Maybe you should write something that's, I don't know, a little truer to your experiences, like your personal experiences. And he's like, oh, I hadn't quite thought about it like that. But kind of to go back to what you said, like you think you want to tell it one way, but maybe it wants to come out another way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm.
Well, and to go back to what you said too, like there's a story that everyone can tell or could tell.
Yeah.
And really just figuring out how it's best conveyed with your own skills, talents, and interests, and then something to do with the story. Finding a way to make it happen.
Yeah. For me, for some reason, I can sort of make a movie if I want to. It's of course not going to be some grand like cinematic, beautiful dream experience. But I've been able to cut together footage to sort of tell a story with video and film. Obviously writing and music. I was painting for a while when I was younger, but like that is, I love painting. I love visual art. I think it stopped for me. I just like stopped being able to be satisfied or happy with what I was producing and sort of counting that out of my artistic output. Laura, I should mention, is a really fantastic painter. I really like a lot of the stuff that she's been doing. But yeah, so I feel, I guess just to speak personally, I do feel kind of, what's the word? It's not blessed, but it's like fortunate maybe. Blessed. I feel fortunate that I've been able to have the time and the support throughout my life to be able to like develop various skills to be, creative in different ways. I know a lot of people who are like, oh man, they're like maybe late 20s, early 30s, somewhere in that zone, like, boy, I really wish I could play the cello. And I just go like, man, good luck if you want to start doing that now, like not that you shouldn't, but I can just say like, I'm really happy that I started with all of these creative things when I did, because, now I have that foundation and I can just keep sort of jumping off of it.
Do you find that your practice of music and writing for music also relates to like being better at writing poetry?
I will say that,
books,
yeah,
things like that?
yeah, and thanks. That's I was gonna try to link that up earlier, but I lost it. So thanks for bringing it up. When I first met Laura, I was just like astounded at how great her lyrics were and continue to be. As someone who was primarily the like lead guitar player, in the groups that I was in, or the sort of like lead like music writer. I always wanted to be writing and singing the songs too, but every time I was like, yeah, I'm gonna write a song, I'm gonna write the lyrics. And I had written, a dozen or so songs, and the lyrics were okay, but I had this block in my head, blockhead. I had this sort of like wall up in my head that was like, you can't write lyrics. Your lyrics suck. They're stupid. All these horrible, like just like self-defeating kind of things. And it wasn't really until I met Laura that I was like, just, in talking with her, was I able to sort of transfer the energy, because I could write a poem, I could write a story, any of that sort of actual writing, non-musical, non-accompanied by music writing, right? Because there is music in fiction and in poetry, of course. But, like, you're not going to play your guitar and read your short story, you're going to write the short story. I could do that just fine. That all made sense to me. But like the transferring that writing ability to writing lyrics took me years, a long time. And like, meanwhile you're having little things published here and there, your poetry is getting published, your stories are getting sort of recognized for being good stories or whatever. And over here on this side, it's like, what rhymes with, ring? Boy, I wish I could make this couplet work in this song. And I said it again. I'll say it again. I'll keep saying it. It wasn't until I started working and writing songs and being with Laura that I really sort of let that wall come down in my head, for like being a lyricist. And there is a definite, being a lyricist is an art form. I mean, it's some lyrics are just the line. Like I'm thinking of Jason Isbell's "If We Were Vampires." I could start crying right now thinking about the line in the song where he says, what the hell does he say? He goes, I wouldn't have to hold your hand. Yeah, if we were vampires and death was a joke, we could sit on the sidewalk and smoke. I wouldn't have to hold your hand, because we're going to live forever. He's talking about like, if we were vampires, we would live forever, and I wouldn't have to worry about wanting to be close to you and intimate with you because we have this for the rest of our lives. But because you hit the chorus and he says, maybe we'll have 40 years together, and then one of us is going to say goodbye to another one of us. Like, good Lord. I'm like, the power that he packed into that set of lyrics is just stunning. I personally, as someone who sees a thing and says, I want to try to do that, like tried a few different ways to like write at that song to like capture that energy. And of course, with some, not at all success, but Yeah. So being a lyricist, being a good lyricist is just it's not a mystery, and it's not some like you're born with it. There's work, of course. I don't know. Maybe there's a mystery, some magic.
One thing you touched on a little bit that I feel like we've gotten into with a couple of these conversations with musicians, painters, people, anyone doing anything, is the stories that we tell ourselves. The way that we tell ourselves what we can and can't do, and how that affects our actual ability to do those things that we might want. So like it's really interesting to try to reevaluate those as often as possible, and not like make sure we're not telling ourselves an outdated story that no longer is helping us.
Right,
Like
right.
I can't sing, or I can't learn how to play music.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
I could never paint.
Yeah. That's a wonderful way to put it. Those outdated stories. Yeah, certainly. I think I keep circling back to my conversation with my friend this morning. I think I was talking to Laura about it and sort of recapping and sort of like sharing my own experiences with that sort of sensation of creative burnout. Like I can't do it anymore. Does that mean I'm done? Geez. Yeah. It's just, I don't know, man. It's a whole thing. Yeah. You can certainly let those voices pile up. The ones that are telling you no, the ones that are telling you you're not good enough, or someone's better than you. Because there's always going to be someone better than you. There's always going to be a Jason Isbell or whoever who's like writing incredible music. So what? They're not writing your song. They're writing their song. So it's easy, to kind of fall into that. Like, well, I can't be as good as that person, so why should I even try? Like, I think if I don't like do something creative, whether it's play a guitar or turn a knob on a reverb plugin or something like that, if I don't do that at least like, I don't know, once a day, man, you don't want to be around me, So I really think like, what were we listening to today, Laura? Like the guy said, every child should be given a ball of clay, when they're kids, and just give somebody something to be creative with, and everything else just sort of goes away. Yeah. But it's unfortunate when you're right. It's unfortunate when people get so afraid to be creative, whether it's from, probably usually from past experiences that are sort of traumatic in certain ways, that they shut themselves off from that outlet. Yeah, that's. I mean,
it's also just a little bit sad that people think that there's any obligation to be good. You know, like especially in music is so like basically enjoyable by anyone that. Just like being bad at it and enjoying yourself, like without the constraint of thinking like, oh, this has to be. I mean, there are bands who are like objectively bad and people love them.
They do, yeah.
Like I'm sure I love some of them, and
Yeah.
So even if you're the best, there's someone who's worse than you who people prefer. So
right. So
what does it matter?
I know. Yeah, exactly. And that's a great way to put it. Yeah. Fully agree. Yeah.
I got to swap a battery.
Sure. But I guess on the subject of writing, just to throw out this little one here. Excuse me. I'm happy to say that I wrote my first official book last year, and it should be coming out. It's supposed to be coming out this month. It's a sort of like a YA sports novel for Capstone Press, who are based in Mankato. The story is about an 8th grade boy named Luis, whose nickname is Lucky, and Lucky is a really great soccer goalie. But he's also like a really great budding musician, right? And Lucky's dad is like, you have to be on the team. You got to play soccer. And he's like, and then Lucky's like, yeah, but man, I really like playing guitar too. And so it's this sort of like, Lucky has this whole struggle between being on the team and being in his new band that he just started. And it's this sort of whole thing. He sort of gets the best of both worlds by the end, which is cool. But yeah. For me lately, and like, I'll just say it, and I guess whoever's listening can like feel how they feel about what I'm about to say, but I have a hard time writing stuff unless I have a deadline and a paycheck. Because it's just such a time commitment for me, and there are so many other things barreling down the pipe at me, that like, unless I am being basically employed to write something, whether it's an article for a newspaper or magazine, or in this case, this book, I just kind of look at writing as this thing that I really, really like, but I'm kind of afraid of. But I am very happy with the way that book turned out. And I'm excited to get a copy of it whenever it comes out. Yeah.
That story is one I think a lot of people can relate to as well, because it's really easy to be a kid and find a passion and then find another passion, and someone tells you can't do both.
Yeah.
You can't change your interest. You have to stick with the one.
Or right. Because you have a parent who's like, I want you to be this way. And then you're like, but I want to be this way, and like, how do you please these people? And luckily for Lucky, his grandmother, with whom they also live, they live with grandma, right? Or grandma lives with them, or I forget quite the arrangement, but grandma's there, and grandma, she's cool. She was like a jazz singer in New York when she was she was younger, so Lucky's kind of got this, like, he's got this old photograph of grandma, and she's on the stage with the band and she's singing and in this really pretty dress. And he's like, holy cats, you can do that, and like his dad was a sort of like semi-pro soccer player or, something. And so, yeah, it's hopefully it's like a 4th and 5th grade reading level. So hopefully there's some little like 9 or 10-year-old that reads this and goes, okay, cool.
Honestly, I will read that book.
Yeah.
It sounds like a good time.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we finish it up by I'm curious to talk a little bit about the poem you read us at the beginning of the session.
Yeah.
It sounds like the events of this last summer have kind of, they've been a lot for all of us, I think, in one way or another. But if you want to just touch on that and some thoughts on that. Yeah.
So, like anybody, my emotions were no different from anybody else's. I'm sure there were people who didn't feel the same way that we sort of, I'm sure there were people who felt opposite of the way they should have felt after, George Floyd was murdered. But yeah, I grew up like playing punk rock in this band, and the songwriter of the group was like heavily political. We were a socio-political pop punk, socio-political crust punk band, right? So we had hooks, we had like sort of like whoa choruses, but like he was writing lyrics about like helping homeless people, about like it's okay to be gay. Like this was one of our songs. This is like 1999, 2000. So like, that was a really, really big kind of like, it was still you didn't talk about that stuff back then, especially in my rural community where I grew up. So Alex, his name was Alex, he was always writing really like pretty like socially political, socially conscious songs, and I always admired that because, again, I mentioned one of my favorite bands is The Clash, and their whole tack is like, political, be political, talk about the oppressive nature of governments and then how terrible people can be, and like rise up and unionize and get together. And so when it comes down to me as a creative, as a writer, as a musician and all that, I've always kind of struggled to find a way to write like that, right? I've always kind of had a hard time like writing politically, or even like broaching any sort of like political thing. One, because as soon as you write something political, it's probably going to be dated, especially the way news moves now. It's like that political thing is going to be yesterday's news in 3 hours, But with George Floyd, yeah, that just was shocking. It was just a gut punch. It was fucking awful. Of course. And yeah, I know I was doing this thing that month, this was May, where I would get up every morning and I would do what I call them improvisations, right? And I would just write, start with some idea. It could be a memory, it could be a dream, it could be just some line that I had in my head. And I would basically write about a page, until I felt like I had said what I had to say. It was just like, get me on a bullhorn on my soapbox, and I'm just going to like say my piece for 15, 20 minutes in my office and whatever. But with that one, God, I remember where I was when I wrote it. I remember feeling very fucking angry while I was writing it, and very sad while I was writing it. And what I was hoping to kind of, I guess, get out was like, I wanted Derek Chauvin to read it, you know. I was like writing it to him, I guess, like you had a chance to be a decent person. You had like your whole life, you've had a chance to be a good human being. And this, you know, is the course that your life took. This is what you decided to do with this fucking life that you've been given, right? And so I had it in mind to write like a companion piece to it. And I just don't know if I don't know, man. It's like it's heavy stuff, and I just don't think don't quite know how to get in there, you know, and sort of write the part 2 to it. But as far as the piece that I read or will read, depending on where this is framed in the show, as far as the piece goes, yeah, it was cool. You know, sometimes you can get into that flow state. I guess you can use the phrase flow state, right? And you just find yourself lost in the middle of it's a guitar solo. It's you're mixing, you're writing something, you're painting, whatever it is. You find yourself lost in it, and that's how I felt writing that poem. It was like every line was the right line to write. You know, I didn't have hardly any. It wasn't until this morning that I actually combed through it, and I was like, I think I can kind of tighten this up a little bit, cut some of these lines, just sort of cut some of the stuff. And it wasn't even like bad writing. It was just like, I just didn't need to go that far with the line. You can think about like a poem or any sort of writing, you know, like I think Miles Davis says, like, it's the space between the notes, you know, like that's where the music is. It's in the space between the notes. And sort of like when you apply that to writing, you know, it's almost about what you're not saying more than it is about what you are saying. And so with that piece, you know, obviously it hits hard. It's full of stuff. It's full of emotion and full of anger, and full of just the sort of like elastic springing around of, you know, you're imagining being a child. You're imagining this morning. You're imagining the actual act of killing a man. So your mind is doing a lot of jumping around. But there's a certain like. I read it a few times. I think this is the third time that I've read that one, and both times I look over at Laura and you know, she's like just crying both times, and I don't know what to do with that piece. You know, I don't know, like I don't know where it goes. Is it just for me? Is it just for whoever happens to be in the room when I'm reading it? Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. It's just I don't know. It's a poem. It's just a fucking poem. you know? At the end of the day, it's just a poem. But obviously, it's a poem about some pretty horrible stuff.
It's interesting to me. You said that it was written for Derek, and I guess what it made me think of was that maybe it could be written for anyone who's like kind of. I don't know, maybe not him exactly too, but like maybe someone like him or someone, because one of the other things you did there that surprised me was that you like, I don't know, contextualized some of the possibilities of what might have been going on. You just gave a couple of options. Like you're like, this might be what's going on. You didn't make it super hard and firm, but it was kind of like an exploration of what his life might be like, or what that experience might be like.
Right. And yeah,
I think that's interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that came through and that resonated with you. You know, I obviously didn't want it to be like let's look up this asshole's like life and how many kids does he have and what does his wife actually like him? You know, like I definitely didn't want it to be so specifically about that guy. You know, but yeah. So I'm really glad to hear that kind of carried through, because really it's about any person who's about to make, because you can imagine you wake up and then like 6-7 hours later you're doing something horrible like that. Like it's like, how the hell did this happen? Well, what happened today to get me here, man?
Even for someone perhaps who didn't do it, but who like felt that in themselves, or who considered it or was in a position where
Yeah.
that might have happened. Like it's really an interesting exploration, and I think you captured it pretty nicely.
Well, thank
So,
you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
thank you for that, and
Of
thank you
course.
for sharing it with us.
Of course. I sometimes I hesitate to like reveal what the poem's about, but you know, that one's a little charged. So maybe it's good to have some context, some actual behind the scenes context for it. Yeah.
There's certainly a lot of stuff like that. Like for example, the Lincoln Project stuff that was coming out, like on a very grand scale, they were pretty open that we produce stuff for an audience of one, and that is Donald Trump.
Sure.
You know, and like that stuff also resounded with people on a national level.
Yeah.
Because it was relatable, just like,
Yep.
you know, the work that you put together. So I think, you know, sometimes people just need a little help with that, you know, getting into other people's headspace.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Well, we got a couple of songs from you today.
That's
that
right.
We will be posting at some point, maybe to lead up, maybe afterward. We'll feel it out.
Sure.
Thank you for those. They were wonderful, and thank you
Yeah.
for the poetry reading.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. This was, you know, we were going to try to do this last year and stuff got kind of hairy for us. And here we are today. So it's always a pleasure to hang out with you too.
Yeah.
We're back for now. So until next time, thank you.
Of course. Take care.